Okay, we are back to talk about Severance Season 2, Episode 2, Goodbye, Mrs. Selvig. This episode was written by Mohammed El Marcy and directed by Sam Donovan. In the aftermath of the OTC at the end of Season 1, Goodbye, Mrs. Selvig follows the Audis this time and the Lumen leadership as they cope with the 39 minutes that Innies appeared on the outside. Helena sends Milch to fire Dylan and Irving, but also to convince Marquez to come back to work. Helena, along with new security chief that we see, Drummond, meets with Coobel, apologizes for how Lumen treated her. Helena offers Coobel a promotion on the Severance Advisory Council, but Coobel does not accept it, wanting to return to the severed floor. Mark decides to quit Lumen, even though Devin has suspicions that Gemma might still be alive based on what Mark said when he was with his innie. Milch convinces him to return with a large raise and a promise that his innie's happiness will someday surface up and be able to help him on the outside. Dylan tries to get a job at a door factory, but they won't hire him because he's severed. Irving makes mysterious phone calls from payphone to someone else about Lumen, and Bert is seen observing him do this. After any Mark's demands to the board about getting his team back, Dylan and Irving are rehired. Helena also goes back to work. The episode ends with Mark finally being able to confront Miss Coobel, and he asks her what she knows about Gemma. Without an answer, she drives off angrily. So, first episode, all innies. Second episode, all outies. We have some different perspectives here, and I think these two episodes kind of tied together well to tell the story of what happened for those first couple of days, at least, leading up to when these three folks came back to work.
Yeah, no surprise to me that we've shifted here, where episode one of the season was entirely within the office at Lumen and entirely with the Innies. That episode two is entirely on the outside. Um, that made sense to me. Taking to the level of actually seeing Mark going to work and leaving work over and over again, but I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Um, uh, you're just like never seeing, but you can piece it together from what we saw last week, right? Each of those days, if you want to, in
Yes.
your mind and your imagination, you can think about, well, what then this happened. Okay, now he's back down the elevator. And so we do have confirmation that it has not been 5 months. Milchek is a lying liar, as I kind of expected, basically. But indeed, it seems like it's really only been the weekend, right? Like the events of the season one finale were on Friday night, and Mark's back to work on Monday with his new team, right? We've got that would be when he's got Mark W. and Gwendolyn and Daria.
Right.
And then they do that for like 3 days, and then he does uh indeed apparently communicate with the board. And that part was actually true. Apparently this was why.
Yeah, that message did get through, and I'm glad you brought up sort of the timeline of this because it's not that I'm trying to sort through this in my own mind. It's not that, he got his team back after the weekend was over. He did come to work, spend at least a few days with the new team that, the two that were brought over from 5X and one that was brought in from overseas apparently. And then I presume after he makes the proclamation to the board, it then takes a couple of more days for the other three to come back in. So maybe it's the following, it's enough time for Dylan to look for a job and get a job interview, right? So it's, I think we're sort of less than a week or about a week of this whole timeline here that we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we hit another weekend or not,
Yeah.
because Milchek very much was lying to Mark in episode one of the season about the others refusing to come back, at least when it comes to Irving and Dylan, both of whom were just fired by Milchek. Both of
Right.
whom were upset about being fired, right? Irving, I enjoyed Irving going, what, did I break something? I've got some cash upstairs, I'll pay for it, Uh, and yeah, it's interesting too. Well, okay, I don't want to jump around too much. We have to come back to Irving at some point.
Yeah.
And so Dylan, of course, it's like, what am I going to tell my wife? So yeah, I mean, he does have the time to go for that interview at the door factory. I mean, but I guess he's able to line that up pretty quickly. It certainly hasn't been more than a week, and
No.
I really have the feeling that it is like Thursday
Right.
when our original team's back in. You see briefly Mark W. outside complaining about being let go after 3 days because he broke his lease in Grand Rapids to come work this job, you know?
I,
Um,
I loved Marquez walking by and be like, gosh, who's this guy? I mean, it's like, that scene was just fantastic.
he has no idea. Okay. We're told Dario is a floater. I don't know
Right.
what that means exactly. We do get his name. We see his um what lanyard or whatever, like his ID card.
Oh yeah,
Um
yeah.
and uh the others came from 5X, which Drummond, I don't know if we have much to say about this, but it did stick with me that when Milchek says they were laid off from 5X, Drummond goes, 5X? Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
The impression was, I guess, either failing branch or unproductive branch. We heard Mark W. say in episode one they never once met quota. But I sort of bought Milchick's reasoning. Like, guys, you gave me 1 weekend to get this whole thing together. It's like I'm working with what I can here.
yeah. So maybe it's just that this was a failed branch that they shut down and laid off
Yeah,
the employees from, and Milchek's pulling from that. I just wonder, are we going to learn anything more about 5X? Are we going to see these characters ever again?
yeah,
Maybe not, you know. But the casting makes me feel like maybe, but at the same time, maybe it's just one of those things where Severance is a cool enough show, it's a popular enough show that they're just like, hey,
yeah,
you want to do this little bit role? And Ali Shagos like, yes,
yeah. Of
that
course,
sounds
of
great.
course. And I
Um,
think we talked about this. It wouldn't surprise me if they, similar to this episode, we see some pop-ins here and there, or figure out ways to put them in. I mean, especially Mark W. and Gwendolyn; those two seem to be, could have some traction here. As I think as recurring characters. I saw one theory out there that the voice that Dylan is talking to on the phone is actually Gwendolyn. That, at least in terms of the casting news, is not true. So,
mm,
the speculation that that is his wife is, I think, unfounded, but I guess we'll see that his wife has been cast as a different character. So, yeah, we'll
yeah,
don't
we'll,
think
we'll
that's
hold,
the
we'll
case.
hold off on that. I think that we know who his wife is played by, but I don't know what we should say. Um, because I don't know. Speaking of voices, we whiffed on or didn't notice that the building in episode one was voiced by Keanu Reeves,
Yeah,
which is pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah. They
Um,
wanted someone with a warm, authoritative voice or something, and so Keanu was the best choice.
yeah, I'm not the best at recognizing voices, you know, other than like H. John Benjamin or something. I always recognize his voice, but um, anyhow, we're rambling around here. Where what should we talk about? So Milchick visits them outside. This is like it's like the opposite of what he told Mark last week, right? He actually fired Irving and Dylan, whereas it was Mark who he had to persuade to come back.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Um, I think so. You had a question on our show notes here about Milchick and whether the Audis know him.
Yeah, so I was intrigued by it seemed in the conversation when he goes to Irving's house, like they know each other or know of each other, or Audi Irv knows who Milchick is and what role he plays. I mean, there has to be someone who hired these folks into Lumen as
Mhm.
Audi. So, is that Milchick? Is there some other intermediary between them? It just seems like at least Irving knew who he was.
Yeah, but I think that's the simple explanation.
Yeah.
Um, and I seem to recall, I think in season one at one point, Mark calls off work. The
Oh,
Audi
that's
Mark
yes,
calls
yes,
off work, and
yes.
I think he talks to Milchick on the phone.
That's exactly right. Yep. So they do know.
So I think that that's the simple explanation here. That yeah, they all are aware of Milchek from like when they were hired or whatever. Of course, they don't have the experiences with Milchek that their innies have had, so it makes it a weird kind of dynamic for us as viewers, right? Because Milchek has
Yeah,
both sides of that.
exactly.
But I think that's the simple explanation. We also saw Milchek kind of doing the intake for Helly in
Mhm.
season one. Um,
So he's and that certainly lends itself to why it's such a big deal that Coobel was uh, sort of conspicuously hiding the fact that she was living next to Mark. It seems like Milchik is activated as the person who's the go-between both the outies and the innies, and so why it was such a big deal that Cobell was doing what she was doing. So yeah, it sort of clears that up for me. I mean, it raises some other questions certainly, but we learn a little bit more about that process when Milchik talks about onboarding paperwork and things that they've done to sign ahead of time and certainly he's the one that's recruiting these people to come work there, it seems.
yeah, I think something like that. Then what happens if Milchek is now the office manager?
Right.
Who's the new Milchek? Is it Miss Wong?
I was led to believe it was Miss Wong. Clearly, we didn't see her, and that leads to some speculation on my part of whether or not she is severed. But she's stuck on the floor during this episode.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's hard for me to imagine Miss Wong being also the like
Right.
liaison, the intake person,
Right.
or any of that kind of stuff. So maybe that's just going to still be Milchik, you know. Um, you mentioned Cobell. Go ahead and talk about her now. Uh, I don't know what I want to say exactly though. Do you have any thoughts about? I feel like there's a big question in my mind about her motives and also, going all the way back through season one, why she was doing what she was doing,
I guess that's
pretending
a
to be
question
this
of does
someone.
she have changing motives? Whereas it seemed like she was so zealous about Lumen and about Cure and about the mission early on. She seems to, in the finale of season one, encourage Mark to leave. And I don't know. It just seems like maybe maybe because of the way that she's been treated, or realizes that, they don't actually have her best interest in their minds here, that Corbell is kind of turning in a way against what Lumen is trying to do, whereas Milchek is now just the very authoritative, stay within the parameters of what we're doing. Cobell, I'm just not sure what her intentions are with. She wants to get back to those people, I think, but I'm not sure what she wants to do once she's there.
Yeah, I mean, it's if Lumen didn't know, the board didn't know that she was living next to Mark, pretending to be Mrs. Selvig.
Hmm.
I almost feel like they had to know that she was living next to Mark.
Yeah,
That part, they had to know that part. Maybe they didn't know that she was interacting with him and pretending to be Mrs. Selvig, or maybe they didn't know the
yeah,
extent of it, or that's part of my question. I don't even know what they didn't know, right? Uh,
right.
what what was breaking protocol
Huh.
and what wasn't, you know?
Yeah, they keep it seems, such close tabs on clearly they're severed employees, but like all their employees, yeah, how did they not know that she was living there all this time? I don't know that we'll ever know the answer to that
Well,
question.
and isn't it like a Lumen housing development?
Exactly,
You know,
exactly.
um, we get a real confirmation in this episode that Mark is important to what they're doing.
Yeah,
Helena saying, well, we need him to finish Cold Harbor, you know. So was Cobell keeping an eye on him so closely in the outside world because she knew that? Was she going too far? I guess the other possibility that I can't help but consider is it possible that Cobell has an objection to this precise thing that they're trying to do with Gemma?
I think that you may be onto something there because I believe in Gemma and Mark's last interaction in season one, she's sort of disappointed that there was not a connection there between them or a recognition at least. At some point, whether it's now or in the future, we need to have this conversation about, 'cause, you brought this up. Why is Mark important? Is it have to do with Lumen took Gemma, who was dead or thought to be dead, and what he's doing is somehow helping resurrect or revolve or whatever to her the language that they're going to use, and he's 68% of the way done with it, and they need him to finish that, and that he is the one who can help understand if she truly has been brought to the state that they want her to be because he'll be able to recognize her. But then, yeah, how did they get Mark there in the first place? Did they convince him because his wife died? This is sort of becoming one of the central mysteries of what we're looking at here.
Yeah. What direction did, yeah, how did all that occur? What after what, and so on and so forth. I mean, there are a lot of questions around all that. One
Yeah.
thing that does seem clear to me, I guess, I mean, maybe it's not clear to everyone. Maybe everyone is not drawing the straight line that I'm drawing. That Cold Harbor is Gemma.
Mhm.
Are you on the same page as me about
I
that?
don't,
Or
I don't at this point see any other reasonable explanation for it. Yeah.
okay, because we see it says Cold Harbor on that shot we saw with her face and the data with the bins on the bottom. It's 68% complete. Um, why wasn't Mark working on that? And see, why was Gemma um Miss Casey the wellness counselor in season one?
Yeah.
Seems to me like that has to be part of the overall plan in some way.
Yeah, it's almost like in their situation with Mark and Gemma, they found the perfect scenario and what they've been looking for all along, right? This idea of someone who was involved in some horrible accident, someone who is looking because of that to separate their mind from some of the grief that they're experiencing. And so, whatever it is that they're doing in this medical tech company named Lumen, uh, Mark and Gemma are the perfect sort of laboratory experiments to help them figure out if what they're doing is successful. Yeah. But then part of me thinks, how can we have already figured this out? Like, how can we already have gotten to the end of the story? Like, this seems, as we talked about it last week, of a couple things, a little too, like you've told us too much of the story already for us to just assume that we know everything going forward.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe. Um, this is at least the idea that I'm playing with, that they are somehow through the severance chip trying to resurrect a person, or they
Right. Right.
functionally have already to some degree. And now it's a matter of refining the personality. Um, because there was always a way in which Miss Casey seemed a little off or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, is that too much too soon? I don't know, because I don't know what the ultimate story is here, and of course there are lots of questions in various directions. Are we going to return to the idea of reintegration at some point? Are we going to
Hmm.
see? Man, I need to make a note of that woman's name. Um, the
Oh,
reintegration.
the reintegration doctor.
I just had it, yeah,
Yeah, it's
in
Rigabi, Dr. Rigabi.
Rigabi, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just had it before we sat down to record, and it didn't write it down. Um, we're going to see Rigavi again, all of that. One thing I did think was kind of interesting is that when Coobel is talking to Helena at the very, very, very long table, Coobel says, we need to do an investigation to figure out how Dylan was able to get into that room and do
Yeah.
this. It's kind of noteworthy to me that it seems like they aren't investigating that part.
Yeah, I've thought about this that okay, they somehow were able to manage to get in there after hours, knowing it's paying attention. They didn't catch it on the cameras. Yeah, how did that breakdown in security happen? Clearly Cobell was not there, but was Milch not paying attention? Was he distracted? I don't know the exact circumstances, but yeah, how did
Well,
we let
we
this
know
happen?
how it happened, though, and let me remind you, if it's not on the top of your
Yeah,
mind, we know how it happened. How it happened is Mark Scout, the Audi, went and met with what's her name again, Rigavi,
Rigabi. Yep.
Rigavi, about reintegration or
Hmm.
picking up the phone that Petey had, right? That he went and met her, and Grainer showed up,
Yep.
and they killed Grainer, and Mark took Grainer's security card. That's how they were able to get in there and do what they did.
Yeah, but that's the how, but then there is the why were they not detected when they did it,
Oh,
right?
well, I mean, it just seems like it seems weirdly like Lumen's not looking into this part. Um,
Exactly. Okay, that
uh,
we agree on that. Okay, well, yeah, that's where I think we both landed.
which seems odd. Just
Yeah.
seems odd. But like maybe they are, and maybe we just haven't seen it, and maybe they know that part too, or whatever. But
Yeah.
to the extent that this episode gives us a kind of direct entry into their conversations about what they're doing, to the extent that it does, I don't know. It just seemed noteworthy to me that
Yeah.
you know, do they know what happened to Grainer? Um, Also related to that, Grainer had figured out that PD had reintegrated, which the board insists is impossible. There's all,
Yes.
all that's still kind of hanging out there in the background. It's got to come back around at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so, but to put a bow on it, I think that Gemma died because Mark says he identified her body and so on. And Lumen took her and somehow, by using the severance technology, brought her back to life. But she's wonky, whatever, right? And now trying to like calibrate her personality or whatever. And they think that Mark, because of their personal connection, at least at operating at some unconscious level, is, that they need him to refine this file. See, but this can't be the whole story. I think you're right about that.
No, it's not the whole story, but I think the building blocks are there, right? So you think about Marcus, Eliar, Irv, Dylan, they all have very distinct and individual personalities when they're down there. Miss Casey does not. Like
Yeah.
she's just robotic. And so I do think that this idea of refining is trying to bring something out in her that doesn't exist down there. Mark is the person to do it. Someone who has a connection with her is the person to do it. Which also raises two questions to me. Again, we can table these for later, but A, in Milch's conversation with Mark S about what you feel down there will eventually rise up to you up here, right? Is there sort of sense of that's how they think it happens, that she'll experience something, and then when they activate her or take her off the severed floor, it'll be able to, be a part of who she is. And then also, we've never seen, like, say, for example, when Mark S is training Helly on how to do the macro data refinement, he can't point to her screen and say, "Oh, those are the numbers right there. Choose those and put them in the thing." It's more of like you'll know it when you see it. You'll know it when you
Mm-hmm.
feel it. And so are each of those people down there connected to someone that is important to them or close to them that they're refining? It's more of an emotional thing. That's how the work is done, at least.
Yeah, I mean, part of what I was going to say next is there are clearly other people who are being refined. They were doing work before,
Yeah.
like they were completing files last season that were different files. So what's going on with all of those files, which I'm guessing are connected to people
Hmm.
who I don't know. I don't know that there always has to be some close personal relationship or
Yeah.
whatever. Maybe it functions on the basis of capacities for empathy or what have you. I mean, it's kind of weird. Like the numbers are
Yeah.
scary. But yeah. So what are they up to? To circle back around then to something I kind of floated earlier, right? One possibility to think about is, well, maybe Coobel was fine and on board with everything that they were doing until it came to the idea of we're going to like try to resurrect a dead person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she's like, oh, Kier would not approve. You know,
Yeah, exactly.
it's got to be an internal critique, right? And the other thing I would tie in to this idea is whether this is what Jane was referring to in season one finale when he said this line about his revolving, you know. Um, let's tie one more thing into this. The motto on Milchek's license plate, I believe we had seen this before.
Yeah.
Rem, remedium
Remedium
hominibus.
hominibus, which, yes, you are
Hominibus.
correct. We saw this on Mark S's license plate in season one, and we see it very clearly here again on Milchick's motorcycle. I did some searching on what this means. Did you do any looking into this?
Well, I mean, it translates into a cure for mankind, basically, right?
Yeah,
Not a
and
cure for mankind, but a cure, comma,
yeah, so there's this idea
for
of
mankind.
does that mean, and this is sort of the big speculation that's out there online, you can go find all this. Does that mean, you're curing mankind of some kind of virus or disease or whatever, or probably more appropriately, a cure for what is wrong with mankind, aka something like mortality, where you're trying to fix that and you're trying to resolve how you can, how mankind can
Yeah.
fix this problem.
So I think, yeah, let's just extrapolate the cult out, right?
Hmm?
That ultimately what Lumen wants is for everyone to be severed, everyone to have this chip. Why? Well, not just so that they can exploit the innies and work situations or whatever, no, but to balance the tempers of everyone, right? That there's some, I think we have to take all of the cure stuff. We have to take all of the pseudo religion seriously because
Yeah,
I think it should be. I mean, in terms of what they're doing, I think they are serious about it, and that's tied up with what Lumen ultimately wants.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think once again you're on the same page about that. It's just okay, where does this, if this is two or three steps, what are the next 100 steps? I'm just not, yeah, I'm very interested to find out.
Yeah, same. Speaking of James, I did think this was something of a question. We see him confronting Helena. He calls her a fetid moppet. Um, does he know what happened? Because that seemed a little bit odd to me.
Like, does he know what happened when she got up on stage and gave her speech?
Yeah, does
I,
he know that the innies were out in the world?
um, I assumed that by the time he got back to her, someone has whispered in his ear, "This happened. This is why she did this. This is she was in the OTC or whatever it is, she's not clearly not your daughter up there saying this. This is someone who is a severed, less than human. We've heard them say that before. That was my impression,
But does that
but
track with him coming into the room and calling her a stupid little girl? A stinky, stupid little girl. And fetid.
unless he thinks that she's still, I don't know. I don't know.
Mhm.
She's still under the OTC. It's hard to say because it's almost like it's not too far from his personality no matter what's going on, right? He's just this very overbearing, no respect for people beneath him
Mhm.
type of man. Whether he treats Helena that way or he treats her that way because she has the capacity to do what she did, right? That part of that could come out.
Hmm.
I don't know, but yeah, it fit
That
with the
okay, yeah,
personality.
that's interesting, right? From James' perspective, perhaps that Indy is still her, and this is tied up with his whole overall philosophy. So it's not an excuse. Yeah, I think it's one possibility.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's worth tracking the other one, right? Because the population at large clearly doesn't know about the overtime protocol, and they don't want them to know about that. They don't
yeah.
want to admit that this is what's happened, and thus you get Helena recording the video where she said that she got drunk while she was taking a non-lumen medication. Not that wasn't a
For
lumen medication
for an arm rash, yeah,
or not, right? Um, and tries to pull off the I was joking and I was drunk or whatever, right? And
yeah,
instead of
yeah.
the real story. So it seems like it seems to me like they're keeping the real story from even their friends and allies in the outside
Yes.
world, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it just struck me as a possibility, like, all right, James, like the CEO of the company, but maybe he doesn't know about the overtime protocol, and they've kind of kept it from him. He doesn't seem to be involved in running anything,
No, no.
right? So
Yeah.
it does seem to be a possibility to think about, but um,
Yeah.
maybe.
What do you think now, since we're on the subject of Helena and Helly, what do you think now about the theory that she is unsevered or deactivated when she goes back onto the floor, now that we've seen what the at least the immediate events that led up to that?
Yeah, I mean, so it could go either way. I'm still more leaning in the direction that this is Helena, the Audi. Um, my guess would be that her chip has been deactivated or
Yeah.
something rather than removed, if this is the case. Um, if it were completely removed and so on and so forth, we would have to grapple with the sadness of the Innie Heli being functionally dead or no longer existing.
Yeah.
Um,
I can't help but think that, yeah, PD had to go, do some sort of black market reintegration surgery, but Lumen, in developing this technology, developed an on-off switch for it, especially if they're going to try it on, their own descendant. I have to imagine that they just flip the off switch if this is in fact still Helena going downstairs.
yeah, I mean, I think there would be this difference. Reintegration, right, is PD precisely trying to integrate the experiences of both his Innie and his Outie,
Hmm.
right? The other possibility would be, I think if you remove the chip or whatever, I don't know that that would give you reintegration,
Yeah,
or if the experiences of the Innie would just be lost. That's what
right,
I'm imagining.
right.
Um, and I don't know that I think that Helena went so far as to do that, because I think that something about the severance chip is tied up in the whole pseudo religion stuff.
Hmm.
I'm still leaning towards thinking this is Helena. It's really interesting seeing some of the reactions in the world, because it almost seems like the very same things are being pointed to by both sides. Like for me, the biggest piece of evidence is that she lied about what happened. And other people are like, well, it's not Helena Eagan because she was embarrassed and that's why she lied about what happened.
Yeah,
So I don't
yeah.
know. What do you
There were
think?
plenty. I still lean towards that being Helena, who went down, to work that back to work that first day. There are plenty of people who have picked up on the fact that, we saw the events leading up to and including Mark S., Dylan, Irving getting on the elevator and going down to, start the work day that we saw in episode one. Those first three all got the standard, ding of the elevator that often has the what they've now called the Zolly shot that sort of transitions them from the Audi to the Innie.
They
Helena
only
did
finish.
not.
Good.
Yeah, Helena did not. So they're sort of using that as a clue. Whether that means something, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like I was trying to focus in on that because that would be big evidence, right? But then I realized they only ever do the dolly shot with Adam Scott.
Right. That's right. Yep.
We've only ever seen the dolly shot with Adam Scott. So it's like, oh, the fact that we don't get it with the other people, we can't read anything in. Um, is there no ding on the elevator? Maybe, I'm not sure. The soundtrack changes
Right.
in that scene. I think,
This is just what this show is meant for, to like pick up on clues like lacks of things in elevators and read so much into it that, a whole Reddit thread can be created around this, this one thing.
yeah, all I'm pretty sure about at this point is I'm pretty sure they want us to be debating this.
Yes, absolutely.
So, no one's super smart for like coming up with the idea. Like I'm pretty sure they want us to be debating whether it really is our friend Helly R, the Innie, or um that bitch Helena Egan. It's so striking. I mean, and props to Britt Lauer, by the way, because we've seen this was the first time where we really saw the Audi Helena at length. And, the ability for these actors to play two versions of the same character who are meaningfully different, and yet also you can feel that they are, kind of two sides of the same coin, or however we want to put that, or whatever, right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
it kind of it tracks that the Audi is like this and the Indy is like that. Um, yeah, just really really impressive acting work from Brett Lauer, I think.
Yeah. All of them. I mean, all four of them have just been able to pull off that duality, as you said, has really been magnificent.
Yeah, we just haven't seen as much of Irving and Dylan on the outside, I guess,
Right.
is what it comes down to. And they don't seem, neither of them seems like hugely different from their any from what we've seen so far, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, of course they are in small ways. And yeah, they're doing good work as well. Worth noting that Helena does watch that video of Helly and Mark S kissing. We were talking about that kiss a little bit, I recall, last week. Well, so she does know it happened. She definitely saw it. She seems kind of, I don't know, like, it's interesting. Is this like she's envious of her innie or
That's
something?
exactly how I read it. Like she has never had a real authentic emotion in her life. And she's like, wow, I wonder what that must feel like to care for someone like that. Like I do think she's a little bit jealous.
So you could read it in that way, right? And then say, oh, well, because of that, now she is willing to go back in and become her innie again.
Mhm.
You could read it in that direction. A couple more things we want to hit on before we're out of time here. Irving, I want to talk about his phone call.
Yep.
Um, it's hard to hear, but if you have the subtitles on or whatever, he says, "I want you to know my innie got the message." Who's he calling? I think I kind of jumped to the conclusion in my article, which people can go read on tvobsessive.com, that he was calling Bert, but I've second guessed that since I wrote that the other day. Maybe I was only thinking that because we immediately cut to Bert watching him from a car, right, where it's kind of sinister or whatever.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on who Irving is calling there?
I mean, yes, my first immediate thought was Bert, and maybe I just confirmation bias. Oh, it must be because there he is watching
Yeah.
Irving. Which why is he watching Irving? How does he know that, what's going on here? What is he tracking him for? So, I think either of these things are just as plausible that the two of them are connected somehow on the outside, or that Irving is somehow connected to one of these anti-severance groups that we saw in season one, and they've been working with him to try to create something where they can communicate back and forth. So I think either of those are just as plausible at this point.
Yeah. We have not seen what happened after Irving was banging on Bert's door, like
Right.
presumably Bert or his, I don't know, husband, presumably,
Yeah.
comes and answers the door. We haven't seen that, right? We just got Irving back at his house. Irving lies to Milch.
Mm-mm.
Irving finds the map in his pocket. Um, and I think that the fact that that has Bert's name on it, maybe also just the sequence led me to think that he was calling Bert, which would imply that they do know each other on the outside.
Yeah.
Um, but I really am second guessing that now, because I think the other way to read this would just open up more questions of who is Irving calling? Maybe it is the reintegration folks or something like that. Why has he been making all those paintings? Is that the message to the innie? How does all this kind of hang together? And then how does Bert factor in? Why is Bert watching him from the car? Are they enemies on the outside? Is that
Yeah.
possible? Did Bert really retire because he wanted to retire, or was he forced out against his will when
Yeah.
it came to him not working at Lumen anymore? All sorts of things, and we get very little here, but I hope we get more as we move forward.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think there are a lot of plausible theories out there. Bert could have been forced to retire, but we're gonna quote unquote keep you employed. But what you have to do to stay employed is to follow this guy and you know give us feedback on all his movement. It could be anything that we just don't have enough yet to say how were they connected on the outside, opposite of how we knew they were connected on the inside.
Yeah. But still playing with the idea that at some point in the past, Irving was a non-severed employee who was in Milch's position or something. How has he seen that hallway that he's painting?
Yep.
And so on and so forth. Briefly, we have to hit on the door factory scene. Um, as you put in our notes, and I knew this as well. This was on the official podcast. Dan Erickson was working at a door factory when he came up with the idea for Severance. Delightful little scene with the interview at the door
Yeah.
factory. Right?
Everything from how old were you when you fell in love
Yeah.
with doors
What's
to
your favorite kind of door?
yeah, just the utter disdain when Dylan tries to make a joke like door prize, and he's like, how dare you mock doors? That type of reaction. Just I mean, just unbelievable scene, and yes, just a complete callback to a miserable job Dan Erickson had, where he came with the idea of, boy, I wish I could separate the life that I have here from somewhere
Mm.
else, and that's why we have this show.
And again, disdain for the fact that Lumen makes their doors in house. The
Yeah.
hubris. But also, maybe more meaningfully to the show, we get, this indication that there are people in the world who are really against severance, the procedure, to the extent of, yeah, I mean, what you could call discrimination. Dylan calls it
Exactly.
discrimination. I don't think it is legally in the world of the show, but who knows? Um, but yeah, he doesn't get the job because he has been severed for Lumen, and that's made pretty clear here. So that's worth noting. And I think it's great. It seems. I wonder how much of this was pulling on Dan Erickson's experience,
Hmm.
because this is one of those scenes, the interview, where it is absolutely absurd, but also strikes me as almost hyper realistic.
So I did get a chance to listen to the official podcast Stiller, Adam Scott, and they had Dan Erickson on for this episode, and he talks about this. And he first jokes that, oh, this was exactly verbatim the words that were said in the interview, but then he's like, no, not really, but there's some truth to
Yeah.
the interview. Yeah.
So I've been on job interviews before, and you have to imagine, like, you have a job interview at a door factory, you got to be prepared to answer questions like, "What's your favorite kind of door?" That
Yeah.
kind of thing happens. I remember having this interview when I was maybe 20 years old for like a gas station job, and then the manager's like, "Imagine that there's some conversation between me, you, and this ice machine." I'm like, "What are you talking about, dude?"
Uh,
Why do you want to work at a gas station? Well, high five. Ever since I was a little kid, I dreamt of working at a gas station.
since you were 5 years old, I know.
So anyway, that's a great scene. I think we've hit on our bullet points here. Hopefully, we didn't miss anything of significance. There's a lot in these episodes. Um, love talking it through with you, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. I do
Um,
imagine we'll start the back and forth in the episodes going forward, but who knows? I guess we'll see you with episode 3 if we start spending time in both worlds going forward.
I am going to be curious about that,
Yeah.
because it's almost like, I don't know. The back and forth would feel good, right? As a viewer, like, that's sort of what I want. But it'd be interesting if they withhold
Hmm.
it's one thing or the other.
Yeah.
Okay, regardless, we'll be back next week talking about season 2, episode 3. Hopefully you'll join us. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do leave a good rating, review, and so on wherever you're listening. If you're watching a YouTube video or whatever here, give a thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow TV Obsessive on social media. Search for TV Obsessive. You should find us, and please do also check out the site, tvobsessive.com. I'm writing on Severance episode to episode, week to week there. You want to look out for my articles on this show. I also wrote on season 1. And I also have like a kind of theory type piece on there that I would encourage people to read, if you're interested. Also cover any number of other TV series, and so on. So do check out the site, poke around, and we'll be back next week talking about Severance.
All right, looking forward to it. See you then.